Some men get the call that destroys them. A knock at the door at midnight, a voice on the other end that doesn't sound right. I got 7 days of photographs. My daughter posting brunch photos, birthday photos, a weekend trip to Sedona, every single one of them while my phone sat silent on the kitchen counter like a stone. That's what broke me. Not a tragedy. A scroll. My name is Frank Alderman. I spent 31 years teaching high school history in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. Not the kind of job that makes you rich. The kind that makes you tired in ways that feel meaningful, if you're lucky. I coached junior varsity baseball for 19 of those years. I drove a used Silverado until the transmission gave out twice, and then I drove it a third time anyway because I didn't see the point in buying new when something could still be fixed. My wife Carol and I raised our daughter Melissa in a 3-bedroom house on Magnolia Court, the same house where we still eat dinner every night, the same house where Melissa learned to ride a bike in the driveway, where she cried over her first broken heart on the living room couch while Carol sat next to her and didn't say a word, just held her hand until the crying slowed. We gave her everything we had. Not everything money could buy, we didn't have that kind of everything, but the other kind. The showing up kind. The kind that costs you sleep and weekends, and the version of yourself that existed before children arrived and quietly rearranged your entire life around them. I want you to understand that before anything else, because everything that comes after only makes sense if you know what came before it. It started with a phone call I didn't make. That might sound strange, so let me explain. Melissa had been married to a man named Brandon Holt for 4 years by the time any of this happened. Brandon's family had money, real money, the kind with a name attached to it in certain parts of New Orleans. His father owned 3 car dealerships. His mother sat on the board of something important I could never quite remember the name of. They were perfectly pleasant to us at the wedding, the way people are pleasant when they've already decided you belong in a different category than they do. After the wedding, things with Melissa shifted. Slowly at first, the calls dropped from once a week to once every 2 weeks, then to once a month, then to whenever she got around to it. I told myself it was normal. She had a new life now, a new family, new obligations that pulled her attention in a dozen directions at once. I told myself that because the alternative that she was pulling away on purpose was something I wasn't ready to sit with. Carol noticed before I did. Carol always notices first. She didn't call on your birthday, Carol said one morning in October, not accusatory, just stating a fact the way you state the weather. She probably forgot, I said. She's busy. Carol looked at me the way she has for 34 years whenever I'm doing the thing where I explain away something I don't want to feel. She didn't say anything else. She didn't need to. 3 weeks after my birthday, I noticed Melissa had posted 47 photos on her social media in the span of 10 days. Brunches with Brandon's sisters. A weekend in Sedona with Brandon's college friends. A birthday dinner for Brandon's mother, a woman Melissa had known for 5 years, a woman she now called Mom in the caption, with a little red heart beside it. I sat with that for a long time. I want to be honest with you about that, because I know how this kind of story can go, and I don't want you thinking I'm a man who can't look at himself clearly. I asked myself whether Carol and I had done something, whether we'd pushed too hard or held on too long or failed to welcome Brandon the way we should have. I went back through every conversation, every visit, every holiday dinner, looking for the moment I might have missed. I couldn't find one, but I kept looking, because it felt better than the other explanation. Then came the week she went silent. Melissa and Brandon had bought a house 2 years earlier outside of Covington, just across the lake from New Orleans. A beautiful place, 4 bedrooms, a wraparound porch, more house than 2 people needed, though neither of us said that out loud. Carol and I had quietly co-signed the mortgage. Brandon's credit was thinner than it should have been for a man his age, and Melissa called us one Sunday afternoon and explained the situation with a practical, almost businesslike tone that I remember finding slightly strange at the time. We signed without hesitation. That's what you do. At least, that's what we thought you did. I needed to reach Melissa about a piece of paperwork the mortgage servicer had mailed to our house by mistake. Something to do with the escrow account and a property tax adjustment that required her signature. Nothing urgent, but something that needed to be handled within 10 business days. I called her on a Monday. Voicemail. I figured she was at work. I left a message, kept it brief. Hey, sweetheart, it's Dad. Got something from the mortgage company that needs your attention. Nothing serious. Just call me when you get a chance. Tuesday, nothing. Wednesday, I tried again. Voicemail again. I called Brandon's cell this time. The number I had to dig out of an old text thread because I'd never needed to use it much. Voicemail. I sent Melissa a text message. Clean and simple. Hey, need to talk to you about some paperwork. Not urgent, but sooner is better. Love you. That night, Carol was on her phone scrolling through something, and she went very quiet in a way that made me look up from the news. She posted 3 photos tonight, Carol said. She didn't show me the screen. She set the phone down face first on the end table. She's been on her phone. Neither one of us said anything for a minute. She's probably just overwhelmed, I said. Carol picked up her coffee cup and looked at it. Maybe. By Friday, it had been 5 days. 7 calls between the two of us. 4 text messages. I wasn't sleeping right. I'd catch myself staring at the back door during dinner, fork in hand, not eating. Carol would say my name, and I'd come back to the room like I'd been somewhere else entirely. On Saturday morning, I saw that Melissa had updated her profile photo. A new one, her and Brandon, at what looked like some kind of gala. She was laughing in the photo, genuinely laughing, head tilted back, one hand on Brandon's arm. She looked healthy, she looked happy. She had clearly been on her phone within the last several hours. I set my coffee down on the counter very carefully, because I didn't trust what I might do if I wasn't deliberate about every small movement. Something in my chest was making a sound I hadn't heard from myself in a long time. I called her one more time. One more. It went to voicemail before the second ring, which meant she saw my name and sent it there, manually, on purpose. I stood in my kitchen in Baton Rouge, 63 years old, a man who had coached 19 years of other people's children, who had never once left a student without an answer when they came to him with a question, and I felt something I can only describe as the floor tilting. Carol came downstairs and found me standing there. She took one look at my face. We're driving to Covington, she said. It wasn't a question. We left at 9 in the morning. Carol drove because she said I was too wound up to be trusted with the interstate, which was probably fair. The causeway over Lake Pontchartrain is nearly 24 miles long, and for most of it neither of us spoke. The lake stretched out flat and silver on both sides of us, enormous and indifferent, the way water always looks when you're worried about something it doesn't care about. What if something happened to her? I said somewhere around the middle of the bridge. Her photos were posted last night, Carol said. What if it happened after? Carol gripped the wheel a little tighter. Then we'll be glad we came. We pulled onto their street just before 11. The house looked exactly the same as always. Wraparound porch, flower boxes Carol had helped Melissa plant 2 springs ago, Brandon's truck in the driveway. I noticed there was a second car I didn't recognize parked along the curb. A nice one. A BMW with a temporary tag still on it. Carol put the car in park and we sat there for a second. Her car's not here, Carol said. Maybe it's in the garage. We walked up to the front door. I knocked, heard movement inside, heard a voice say something I couldn't make out. Then footsteps, and then the door opened, and Melissa was standing there in a sundress with a glass of iced tea in her hand and an expression on her face that I will spend a long time trying to describe accurately. She wasn't surprised. That's the part I keep coming back to. She looked at us with an expression that had already arranged itself into something practiced, not shock, something flatter than that. Something already decided. Mom, Dad. She said it the way you'd acknowledge people who'd shown up to the wrong address. Behind her in the living room, I could see Brandon on the couch, and beside him a woman I recognized as his older sister, and 2 other people I didn't know, music playing, glasses on the coffee table. An afternoon in full swing that we had clearly just interrupted. Melissa. Carol's voice came out soft and shaky in a way I hadn't heard from her in years. Sweetheart, we've been calling you for almost a week. We didn't know what to think. We were so worried. I know you were calling, Melissa said. She kept her voice low, controlled, with one eye drifting back toward the living room. I just didn't have the energy to get into it. I heard that sentence land somewhere in the center of my chest. Didn't have the energy, I repeated, quiet. Look, this isn't a great time. She shifted her weight to one hip. We have people over. We can see that, I said. We just needed to know you were all right. And there's the mortgage paperwork that, Dad, she said my name the way you say it to someone who is embarrassing you in public. Patient, clipped, a blade wrapped in a reasonable tone. I've been busy. I can't be available every time you call. I have my own life now. You and Mom need to understand that I'm not going to drop everything every time you panic. Behind her, I heard Brandon say something to his sister that made her laugh quietly. I don't know what it was. I didn't need to know. We didn't panic, Carol said, and her voice was still steady, but I could hear what was underneath it, the same thing I felt in my chest. We tried to reach you for 7 days. You were posting photos online. We thought something had happened to you. Melissa looked at my wife, her mother, the woman who had held her hand through every hard thing, who still had a box in the closet with every drawing Melissa had made in elementary school, who had sat on the edge of her bed the night before her wedding and told her she was the best thing that had ever happened to us, and Melissa sighed. She actually sighed. This is exactly what I mean, she said. You make everything into a crisis. It's exhausting. I'm not going to apologize for needing space. She glanced back inside. I'll call you next week, okay? You need to go. She stepped back and closed the door. Not slammed it. That almost would have been easier. She just closed it. Gently, firmly, like she was closing a chapter she was done reading. Carol and I stood on that porch for a moment. I couldn't measure. The flower boxes were right there beside us. The pink and white petunias we'd helped her plant, still blooming, perfectly tended, completely unaware. I took Carol's hand. We walked back to the car. She didn't cry until we hit the causeway. And when she did, it was the kind of crying that doesn't make much noise. Just tears running without permission, her chin trembling, both hands in her lap because I was driving this time. I drove and held her hand on the seat between us and watched 24 miles of gray water pass on both sides of us. She sighed at me, Carol said, once, quietly, somewhere near the middle. I didn't answer because there was nothing to say to that. She was right. Our daughter had looked at her mother and sighed. We got home a little after 2 in the afternoon. Carol went straight to the bedroom. I sat at the kitchen table for a long time watching the light move across the floor. I'm a history teacher. I understand cause and effect. I understand that things don't happen without reasons, and that the version of events that feels true from inside is almost never the complete picture. I sat there and tried to be fair. I tried to ask myself the hard questions. Had we hovered? Probably, sometimes. Had we made her feel obligated in ways that chafed? Maybe. Were there things Carol and I had said or done over the years that landed wrong, that planted something we hadn't meant to plant? Possibly. But I kept coming back to 7 days. 7 days of silence while she posted photographs and went to gatherings and updated her profile photo. 7 days while the woman who raised her called and texted and lay awake at night running through scenarios. You can forgive a lot of things when you understand the reasons behind them. 7 deliberate days is harder. Carol came out of the bedroom around 5. She sat across from me at the kitchen table and looked at me for a moment without speaking. 34 years, and we've learned to read each other in a way that makes certain conversations unnecessary. I want to know, she said, if we're going to keep doing this. Doing what? Being available when it's convenient for her and invisible when it's not. She folded her hands on the table. I've been thinking about that mortgage. I had been thinking about it too. The next morning I called our mortgage servicer directly and requested a full account review. I explained that as co-signers we were reconsidering our continued participation in the loan and asked what our options were. The representative walked me through it methodically. As co-signers, we had the right to petition the lender for removal from the note, which would trigger a mandatory review of the primary borrower's ability to qualify independently. Given Brandon's credit profile at the time of origination, the bank would almost certainly find the loan undersecured without our backing and issue a demand for refinancing within 60 days. I thanked her and said I'd be in touch. Then I called our attorney, a man named Douglas Farrell, who had handled our estate planning and the paperwork on our own house for nearly a decade. I told him what had happened. I told him what I was considering. He listened without interrupting, which I've always appreciated about Douglas. You're sure? He said, when I finished. I'm sure that I'm done signing my name to things for people who close doors in my wife's face, I said. Yes. Douglas got to work. Within 3 weeks, we had formally petitioned for cosigner removal. The bank responded exactly as the servicer had predicted. They issued Melissa and Brandon a 60-day notice to either refinance in their own names or bring the loan into compliance with a cosigner who met the original underwriting standards. Given where Brandon's credit stood, refinancing independently was going to be a significant challenge. Melissa called 11 days after the bank letter arrived. I was in the backyard when my phone rang, trimming back the azaleas along the fence line, something I do in the fall to give them room to come back strong in spring. I looked at her name on the screen. I let it ring twice. Then I answered. Daddy. Her voice was different. The practiced flatness from the porch was gone. What was underneath it sounded younger, scared. Did you do something with the mortgage? I started the process of removing our names from the loan, I said. I kept trimming. Your mom and I decided it was time. You can't do that. Her voice jumped. Brandon's trying to get a business loan right now, and if the bank flags our mortgage as daddy, this could tank our credit. We could lose the house. I know, I said. That was explained to us when we first co-signed, the same way it was explained to you. Why would you do this? This is insane. Because I didn't call you back for a few days? I set the clippers down on the garden wall and took a breath. Not because I was going to lose my temper, I wasn't, but because I wanted to say what I was about to say without any wasted words. 7 days, Melissa. Not a few days. 7. While you posted photos and went to parties and sent my calls to voicemail manually. Your mother drove 4 hours round trip because she was scared something had happened to you, and you opened that door and sighed at her. You told us you were exhausted by us. You told us you had your own life, and we needed to understand that. I paused. We do understand. We're acting accordingly. Silence on the line. I'm your daughter, she said, and now her voice broke on it, cracked right down the middle. How can you do this to your own daughter over an argument? I'm not doing anything to you, I said. I'm simply no longer doing something for you. There's a difference, and I'd like you to sit with that for a while. I told her I loved her. I told her I'd talk to her soon, and then I hung up. I stood there for a moment in the yard with the phone in my hand, looking at the azaleas. They looked rough right now, cut back, and a little raw. But that's how you make room for something better in the spring. You have to be willing to cut where it hurts. Carol was in the kitchen when I came inside, standing at the counter with a cup of tea, and she looked at me with a question on her face. She called, I said. Carol nodded slowly. She already knew what my answer had been. She'd been the one who sat at that table with me and said we were not going to keep doing this. She had made her peace with it before I had, honestly. She'd just waited for me to catch up. Brandon's refinancing fell through twice over the next 6 weeks. I heard the updates secondhand through Melissa's aunt, who still talked to Carol regularly and passed along what she knew without editorializing. The property tax adjustment I'd originally called about had also snowballed into a small escrow shortfall that complicated things further. By the time their 60-day window was nearly closed, they were facing the real possibility of having to sell the house. They drove to Baton Rouge on a Saturday morning. I saw them pull up from the kitchen window Brandon's truck, both of them inside, Brandon gripping the wheel with the look of a man who doesn't want to be somewhere but has run out of alternatives. Melissa came to the door first. She knocked twice. I opened it and stepped back to let them in. They sat on the couch in the living room. Carol came in from the kitchen and sat in the chair across from them, hands folded, face composed. I sat beside her. Melissa had clearly been crying recently. Her eyes were dry now, but you could tell. She held her purse in her lap like a shield. We need help, she said, quietly, without preamble. I waited. The refinance isn't going to happen in time. Our agent says if we can't close a new loan in the next 2 weeks, we'll have to list the house or the bank starts the default process. She swallowed. We're asking if you'd consider coming back onto the note. What changed? Carol asked. She wasn't cold about it. She was genuinely asking. Melissa looked at her mother. Really looked at her, maybe for the first time since that porch in Covington. Something in her face shifted, and for a second I could see the girl who had cried on this living room couch about a broken heart, the girl Carol had sat beside without saying a word. It was still there underneath everything that had grown over it. "I know how I've been," Melissa said. "I know I let Brandon's family become more important than mine. I know I've been different since we got married, and I know what happened when you came to the house was wrong." Her voice cracked. "Mom, the way I treated you on that porch, I've been thinking about that every day for 2 months." Carol looked at her for a long moment. Then she said, "Why didn't you call back?" The simplest question in the world. Melissa pressed her lips together. "Because I knew if I heard your voice, I'd have to feel how bad it actually was. And it was easier not to." That's the moment I'd been waiting for, without knowing I was waiting for it. Not the apology. Apologies are easy when you're scared. The honesty. The part where she stopped explaining and started telling the truth about what she'd actually done. I told her Carol and I would need to talk privately and that they were welcome to wait. Brandon nodded and looked at his hands. They went out to the backyard, and Carol and I sat together in the living room in the quiet. "She meant it," Carol said. "I know," I said. "That doesn't erase it." "No," I said. "It doesn't." We talked for a long time, going back and forth over all of it the way you do when you've been together long enough to move through a hard thing without pretending it's simple. What we agreed on was this. We were not in the business of watching our daughter lose her home over a lesson she had already learned. But we were also not in the business of returning to invisible. Something had to be different, and it had to come from her, not from us asking for it. We called them back inside and sat down. "Here's what Carol and I have decided," I said. "We'll speak to Douglas about withdrawing the petition. We'll stay on the note." I leaned forward. "And we're going to do that because you're our daughter. And we're not going to let pride make a decision that hurts you for the next 30 years. Not because everything is fine. Everything is not fine. What happened these past several months was real, and it's going to take time to repair that. We're not pretending otherwise." Melissa nodded. She was crying again now, quietly. "I need you to hear me clearly," Carol said. "I kept your grandmother's pearl earrings for 18 years. I wore them at our wedding, and I've been saving them for yours. I almost dropped them in the donation box 2 months ago." She didn't say it with anger, just with the weight of what it had actually cost her. "I want us to get back to the place where that moment gets to happen the way it was always supposed to." Melissa crossed the room and put her arms around her mother, and they stayed like that for a while. Brandon sat on the edge of the couch with his elbows on his knees, looking like a man slowly understanding something he should have understood much sooner. That night, after they left, Carol and I sat out on the back porch the way we do most evenings, coffee in hand, the September air still warm enough to be comfortable in Louisiana, the yard quiet around us. The azaleas along the fence were already starting to push out the first pale signs of new growth, just barely, just enough to see if you knew what you were looking for. Carol put her hand over mine on the armrest. I thought about my own father, a man who had worked a paper mill in North Louisiana for 38 years without complaint, who had driven me to every baseball practice in a truck that needed 2 hands and a prayer to start, who had told me once, only once, but I'd never forgotten it, that the most important thing a man can do is make sure the people he loves know it while there's still time to say so. He died the spring I turned 41. We never ran out of time, he and I. We were lucky that way. Not everybody gets that, and I've known it my whole adult life. I had spent 31 years teaching other people's children how to understand the past so they could make sense of the present. And here I was at 63, still learning the same lesson at home. That love isn't just what you give. It's what you're willing to hold to, and hold back, and hold open, depending on what the moment actually asks of you. My daughter made choices that hurt us. And then, when the consequences arrived at her door the way consequences eventually always do, she sat on our couch and told the truth about it. That's not nothing. That's not everything, either. But it's a place to start. Carol squeezed my hand and looked out at the yard, at the last bit of evening light going soft over the fence. "She called this afternoon while you were outside," she said. "She wanted to know if she could come for Sunday dinner next week." I looked at my wife. "What did you tell her?" Carol smiled, just slightly. "In the way she has. That means she's already figured out the thing I'm still catching up to. I told her I'd make the red beans, she said, and to bring Brandon. I picked up my coffee. The yard was quiet, and the azaleas were coming back, and 34 years of knowing the same person had taught me that some things break and stay broken, and some things break and come back stronger at the crack, if you're both willing to do the work. We sat there until the stars came out over Baton Rouge, the same stars that had always been there, the same porch, the same woman beside me who had driven 4 hours over gray water because she couldn't bear not knowing. Some fathers get the call that destroys them. I got 7 days of silence, and then I got my daughter back. Not the same as before. Better, maybe. Harder won, at least. And harder won things, in my experience, are the ones that tend to last. If this story stayed with you, hit that like button, leave a comment, and let me know where you're watching from. I'll see you on the next one. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do isn't chase someone down with more of yourself. It's quietly stop catching them when they fall, and trust that the landing will teach what your words never could. Frank didn't close a door on his daughter. He held one open, patiently, while consequences did the work love alone couldn't. And when she finally walked through it honestly, there was still red beans on the stove and a mother's pearl earrings waiting. A small note for you: this story was created and fictionalized by AI, shared here for your enjoyment, and in the hope that somewhere in it, you found something true worth carrying home.